Would you stand with me? We're going to open the word of the Lord together. Judges chapter 11. We've been going through Judges, and we're going to be looking at these passages through Thanksgiving here. And I want us to take us through to Judges 11. And very interesting, almost troubling kind of passage, admittedly so. And I want us to spend some time here and see what the Lord has to say to us. We're going to begin here with verse 1. Judges chapter 11. Read down through verse 6, and then I'll skip to verse 30 and read down through verse 35. So hear the words of the Lord. Jephthah the Gileadite was a mighty warrior. His father was Gilead. His mother was a prostitute. Gilead's wife also bore him sons. And when they were grown up, they drove Jephthah away. "You are not going to get any inheritance in our family," they said, "because you are the son of another woman." So Jephthah fled from his brothers and settled in the land of Tob, where a gang of scoundrels gathered around him and followed him. Sometime later, when the Ammonites were fighting against Israel, the elders of Gilead went to Jephthah from the land of Tob. "Come," they said, "be our commander so we can fight the Ammonites." And then skipping down to verse 30. And Jephthah made a vow to the Lord. "If you give the Ammonites into my hands, whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return in triumph from the Ammonites will be the Lord's, and I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering." Then Jephthah went over to fight the Ammonites, and the Lord gave them into his hands. He devastated 20 towns from Aroer to the vicinity of Minnith as far as Abel-keramim. Thus Israel subdued Ammon. When Jephthah returned to his home in Mizpah, who should come out to meet him but his daughter, dancing to the sound of timbrels? She was an only child. Except for her, he had neither son nor daughter. When he saw her, he tore his clothes and cried, "Oh no, my daughter, you have brought me down, and I'm devastated. I have made a vow to the Lord that I cannot break." May God add his blessing to the word. You can be seated. He began his life as a tragic son. He ends it as a tragic father. This is the story of Jephthah. It's not a story we tell very often in Sunday school, to be honest, because it's a story of tragedy and family dysfunction and, quite honestly, just foolish faith. Families are supposed to be a place of blessing, but you and I both know that that is not always the case. And Jephthah's story is a stark reminder of that. This story forces us to ask, I think, some hard questions. Is it possible that the tragedies of our past, those hurts that we carry, those times we were rejected, those ways that we were defined, are setting up to create new tragedies in our present and future? In verse 1 of chapter 11 here, we are introduced to Jephthah. Jephthah the Gileadite was a mighty warrior. His father was Gilead. His mother was a prostitute. Now, notice here, the Bible doesn't waste any time. It doesn't waste words. He is born as a result of an illicit affair between a rich man and a prostitute. And the Bible here tells us the basic plot, but we are pretty much left to our own imaginations about how this pans out. The next 6 words give us room for those imaginations to work. Verse 2 says, Gilead's wife also bore him sons. We can only imagine then the dysfunction in this family, the resentment from his stepmother, the shame that his father bore, the jealousy from his half-brothers. He was a constant reminder of his father's failure. And so I wonder what Jephthah was like growing up. How did he react to the news when he was finally told about his heritage, that he was the son of a prostitute? He was born not from love, but of lust. How early did he know that he didn't belong in this family? Did he curse his mother's profession and curse his father's passion? Did he try to compensate in one way by vying for more attention? Did he find himself always trying to prove himself to be stronger and more daring than his own half-brothers? But then I wonder, when he was alone and in the dark, Did the tears fill his eyes, and did he ask God, God, why did I have to be born this way? You know, that's a question that I think a lot of young people ask. God, why did I have to be born this way? So it's no surprise that one day his brothers drive him out saying, you don't belong here. And so, rejected by his family, he fled to the land of Tob, the Bible says. Jephthah is the story of a tragic son. But of course, there's something else that we learn about Jephthah. Maybe it was because he spent his life always fending for himself, always having to prove himself. Maybe it was because he was trying to prove to the world that he was something, that he was someone. You know this. It's not unusual to see people who come from very difficult circumstances allow those same circumstances to forge in them some really amazing gifts and strengths. And so the Bible says that before long, he had a group of men surrounding him, and he was their leader. The Bible calls them scoundrels. Other translations have worthless fellows. Another version calls them outlaws. You get the picture. Thieves and thugs, a gang. And it was this kind of crowd that was needing a powerful, instinctive leader. And apparently, Jephthah was the one who could manage that and do that kind of duty. He could put this group together. Now, the irony here is that Israel itself is at war with a neighboring nation, the nation of Ammon, and they don't have a leader. They lack a military leader that's going to lead them to victory. We've seen this play out in Judges again and again. So when word gets back home that Jephthah is leading a gang and he's doing an amazing thing and he's developed quite a reputation for leadership, they send, in fact, a delegation to Jephthah in Tob and plead with him to lead their forces. Well, Jephthah counters, but you're the ones who just cast me out. I'm sure he's feeling a bit smug about it all, and you really can't blame him, I suppose. But he says, if I do come back and I do win this war, then you have to make me head over all of Israel. And the nation says, fine. It's a deal. They were that desperate. It seemed to them that they could either be subject to the Ammonites or subject to Jephthah, and in comparison, that seemed like not such a bad idea. So Jephthah is this capable, brilliant, if not morally deficient leader. And as you read on in chapter 11, you notice that he tries to avoid war with the Ammonites. In fact, he gives an honest shot to diplomacy. But while he's negotiating, he's also preparing for battle if it comes to that. And pretty soon it becomes clear that the Ammonites are not going to give in. War is going to break out. And so Jephthah makes a vow to God. Verse 30, you read it. And Jephthah made a vow to the Lord. If you give the Ammonites into my hands, whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me, when I return home in triumph from the Ammonites will be the Lord's. And I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering. Now, hold on here, Pastor. Are you kidding me? Is this not hard to understand? God, if you let me win whatever comes out of my house when I get home, I'll sacrifice it to you as a burnt offering. Now, maybe he had a dog he didn't like. I think it probably was a cat that his wife had that he wanted to get rid of. I don't know. But talk about strange and violent. Maybe he was thinking the first person to come out of his home would be a servant. But the whole idea is just wrong and absurd. Now, what we do understand, and I hope you'll follow me here, is this attempt to bargain with God. People do that all the time, don't they? We think of God transactionally. We will give a little, and God will give a little too. Like the person who promises to start attending church if I can just overcome this disease. Or they'll give a big chunk of money when they make it in a big business deal that breaks the right way. But this is beyond the pale, a human sacrifice. This is unconscionable. And yet, I think this is true. To understand this, I think we have to wrestle with what happens in chapter 10. In chapter 10, in Judges 10, verse 6, we read this. Again, the Israelites did evil in the sight of the Lord. This is the common refrain in Judges. But look at this. They served the Baals and the Ashtoreths and the gods of Aram, the gods of Sidon, the gods of Moab, the gods of the Ammonites, and the gods of the Philistines. If you're counting, that's 7 gods. 7 gods listed here. Now, in Hebrew, the number 7 does often tell us something. It's a number of completion, which is to say the nation of Israel had completely abandoned God. Are you with me? They had never been this low. In verse 10 and 11, they are under oppression. True to form, they ask for help. They come back to God. But for the first time in this book, God says no. Why? It's one thing when you're the wayward prodigal coming home in true repentance. God will always honor and answer that kind of prayer. But these people don't want God for God. They're just in pain, and they want somebody, anybody, to make it stop. There's been no change in their heart or their attitude. This is, let me use you, God, to get out of trouble. And I want to pause right there because I think there's a lesson to learn. This is an important observation. It is possible, my friends, to worship God in an idolatrous way. It is possible to worship God in an idolatrous way. You can worship Him and not really know Him. You can worship Him only because of what you can get from Him. This is something that we should regularly examine. Do I worship God? Am I here this morning just to use Him? Or am I here because I've fallen in love and I know He loves me? There's a difference. But the point I want to make here is that Israel, and by extension Jephthah, have followed these other gods and their customs completely. In these cultures, guess what? The pagan notion of sacrificing, including human sacrifices, is quite common. Those pagan practices had infiltrated Israel and Jephthah's mind, by the way, thoroughly. They had learned not to worship their gods so much, but use their gods. And the way you did that was through bargaining, transactions, sacrifice. And so I want to make it clear, the Bible never approves of human sacrifices. But the nations around Israel would regularly participate in exactly that, especially with young children. The Jewish law strictly forbade it. But just like today, I would say, it isn't unusual for people to pick up the sins of their neighbors. And Jephthah, who was only concerned about winning and was willing to pay any price to win, says, I make this vow, this foolish vow. Well, as it would happen, Jephthah wins. He gains a magnificent victory and he returns home in glory. And of course, then we have this scene. I remember we had a children's Bible at home when I was growing up, and I remember looking at the picture of this scene as a kid, watching this girl come out of the house to meet her dad. We're told she comes out joyfully, playing timbrels and dancing. She is proud of her daddy's big win. And I think that Jephthah loved his little girl, just about to become a woman. She was beautiful and precious to him. And as the girl runs to her father, however, his face falls. The warrior begins to tear his clothes. He begins to weep. Verse 35, when he saw her, he tore his clothes and cried, "Oh no, my daughter! You have brought me down, and I am devastated. I have made a vow to the Lord that I cannot break." Now, you and I have several reactions, I think, probably to that statement. We want to tell Jephthah that it's not his daughter that has brought him low. It's his own stupidity. It's his own stupid vow. We want to just grab him by the helmet and say, "Jephthah, are you nuts? God doesn't intend for you to keep this vow. God will honor you much more if you break it rather than if you keep it." But Jephthah, so infiltrated by the culture around him, has developed a false sense of what is honorable. And he's not just going to keep this vow because he is piously devoted to God, because he obviously doesn't know God's heart. He's going to keep it because he's devoted to his pride. Others have heard me say this. And Jephthah will sacrifice his daughter due to his pride. And he's going to pay this foolish vow. Now again, this is a strange story, and if you aren't bothered by it, I'm sorry, because it should bother you. Parents are supposed to protect their children. I remember as a boy out on the farm, and I was in a soybean field that had been recently cut. I remember running into a killdeer. If any of you know what a killdeer is, a small bird, it's a bird who apparently builds its nest on the ground. And she was just screaming at me. Apparently, I had gotten too close to the nest. And as I got closer, she actually stopped screaming, and she changes her tactics. And instead, she starts hopping off. And even more, she puts out her wing and looks like she's almost lame. She's having trouble. And, of course, what she's trying to do is track me, so I will follow her. And as I moved toward her, however, she would get all excited, and she'd run off, but then I decided to kind of go closer to the nest, and she realized I wasn't going after her anymore, so she began to run toward me, and then she flew right at me. I was too close. She was doing everything she could to protect that nest. That's what parents are supposed to do. It's ingrained. Now, we live in a culture where that doesn't always happen, does it? I mean, how many stories that I could list for us about abuse and neglect, and sometimes it just doesn't make sense. But I wonder if we don't see this tragedy played out even more than we can imagine. Because I'm not sure that this tragedy is ancient history. I think that Jephthah may still be with us. Now, he's not a warrior in the field, but he's just as driven. He might be wearing a suit and tie, or she might be managing a nonstop family calendar. He's the neighbor who borrowed your mower. And so he is so conformed to a culture around him that he sacrifices his own children and doesn't even realize he's doing it. See, the modern Jephthah doesn't make a public bloody vow, no, to God. He or she makes a quiet internal vow to something else. Sometimes, let's face it, it's a vow of cultural acceptance. Let me give you an example. This might be the parent who says, well, all the kids have a phone. All the kids are on social media. All the kids dress that way. All the kids play sports on Sunday. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Because our culture worships at the altar of fitting in. And we're terrified our kids will be labeled the weird one. And so we shrug and we give in, and we think because we avoided a fight, we won. But in reality, are we sacrificing our children to the seven gods of, well, everyone else is doing it? Are you the parent who maybe hands over the smartphone and then unfiltered internet, then the keys to the car and says, well, I trust him or I trust her, and I'm afraid of being the strict parent that we give them access to a world that actively wants to destroy their faith and them. And we do it without the hard work of discipleship. We trust them, but have we trained them? There's a difference. We trust them, we say, but have we really trained them? Or maybe it's the vow of success. This is the Jephthah, the father or mother, who wins the battle at the office but loses the war at home. Their life is a relentless commitment to more meetings, more trips, more success, more activity, more of this, more of that, more money. We have to make it while we can. We have to keep up with the Joneses, and in the process, we sacrifice Johnny, who just wants to be with us. Jephthah's daughter, you'll notice, comes out dancing to celebrate her dad's victory. I wonder how many of our kids often will come out dancing, holding a drawing or a good report card, or maybe just a story about the day, but only to find mom or dad on a conference call or glued to a screen or too exhausted from their own day of winning battles to even notice. It could be a pastor so busy trying to do God's will that he loses sight of God's will for his own family. You see, you can be busy with very good things, and they can become the wrong things. We can even lie to ourselves. I'm doing it for her. And perhaps that's the most deceptive vow of all. We tell ourselves, I'm working this hard for my family, but the tragedy is we lose what we love the most. Notice here, Jephthah made it. He's at the top. He won his battle. He's leader of Israel for 6 years, and the crowds cheered when he passed by on parade. They told their children, boy, that's a big man. He's Israel's greatest general since Joshua, and people who only knew him from a distance said, he's got it made. He's a lucky fellow. But what about when the state dinners were over, when he was alone at night and the cheering was done, and he surveyed the landscape of his life? Did he see this tragic son had, through foolish faith, become a tragic father? I don't know about you, and I'm sorry, I know this is depressing. Logic of math means that in our fallen world, this is what we expect. This doesn't surprise us because we've seen it. Tragedy begets tragedy. It's a vicious cycle. We have a saying, hurt people hurt people. The truth is, when you're wounded by your past, you're so much more likely to wound someone in your present. When you're knocked off balance by your family, it's not surprising when you knock your own family off balance. It's the cycle of sin, and logic expects it to continue. If that was the only law in the universe, we would all be doomed. But let me tell you something else. There is another force, a power that shatters that logic, an interruption. There's this thing called grace. Have you heard of it? The grace of Jesus. Grace is the circuit breaker, if you will. Jesus, who took all of my sin, all of my mess, all of that history, and he put it on himself, and he took it on the cross and says, I give you a new life. I'll become your family. I'll give you a new family. I'll become your Father in heaven. Grace is the divine power that says, your past does not get to write your future. I wish I could have told Jephthah about grace. I wish I could have told him that, my friend, the cycle can be broken. I wish I could have told him that just because you were born a tragic son doesn't mean you have to become a tragic father. Because of grace, because of the power of God, which can destroy an enemy, any enemy, including the ones inside of us, the tragic son can become a blessed father. And I've seen God's grace do this. I've seen it in the lives of people right here in this room. Just a couple of weeks ago at this altar, I met a young man who at 15 was thrown out of his home. He lived by himself, trying to just make ends meet. His dad was in drug rehab at the moment we were speaking. He was a 23, became a steel worker. He's doing very, very well. But he said, I need grace in my life, and he was here to find that grace. Maybe this morning you didn't grow up with the best family. Maybe your father was distant or angry or a drunk. Maybe your mom was cold or critical. That doesn't mean, my friend, that you are doomed to repeat that failure. Because of Jesus. When God gets a hold of your life through Christ, He doesn't just forgive your past. He begins to rewire your present. The cycle of tragedy can be broken. You may have had a bad father, but by the grace of God, you can become a great dad. You may have had a mother who did not know God, but you can be a mother who introduces your children to Him. And with God's grace, your home can be different because Jesus can make you different. What happened in Jephthah's family didn't have to happen. That's what I want you to hear. What's happening in your family doesn't have to continue. If we can give God the bitter waters of our life and surrender it to Him, only He can turn something like that into sweetness and good. And so this morning, I just want you to know, if you've made some mistakes, God can forgive the foolish vow. If you're a parent this morning, I want to invite you to come to this altar and pray for your children. For you don't want to be the one that takes their life. You want to be the one, the mom and the dad, who gives life and points them to Christ. And so I ask you, are you a Jephthah? Are you a son of tragedy? Then God's inviting you this morning through His grace, in faith in Christ, to become a father and a mother of blessing. That's His way. And oh, how we need it.